The first thing I feel like once you've rowed, a lot of things in life becomes easy because it's you have like you said you have to get up. There's no timeouts, right? You're breaking your back, you're ripping apart your hands for the person who sits in front of you and the person who sits behind you. But in a short story, the way I can best explain outside of like the hard work you got to put in, the commitment, the discipline, the teamwork that you learn, I think that the most beautiful thing about this sport is that the for me, I went from seeing dirt and concrete every day to watering grass. Like that changed everything for me, right? I was like, geese, I never seen a geese before, right? You have these kids who grew up in inner city who have not had access or been near the water. And I think the first thing for me was like, okay, I always wanted to learn how to swim or go to a beach or go on a vacation. But rowing introduced me to learn how to swim. Like that solved the first problem. In order to row, you have to learn how to swim. And if you learn how to swim, you can go on that vacation. You can build water confidence and all those different things. And so I think that rowing introduced me first to learning how to swim. But I think that, like, as I talked about in my book, that you know you you grow up like having every coach say, learn how to play basketball and learn how to play football. And if you're not good at basketball, people will tell you, like, you suck, you garbage, you're not good, you know? And a lot of young people heard those things from their uncles or people growing up. You suck, you're never going to be good. And so when you see people on the court kind of act out, it's because they can't really take those words or it would trigger something. And then for football, for me, the coach was like, you're big, you're athletic, go try out. And I remember catching a ball for the first time, and the coach was like, knock him dead. And then, I was taking all these hits, and I love football. It's still my favorite sport. But it triggered a lot of trauma I wanted to fight. And I think it was something about rowing when you're out there and you're taught to sit tall and you learn how to breathe and there's no noise and there's only one voice that's saying you belong, stroke by stroke, right? And it's non-combative, there's non-conflict. You're building that magical rhythm, and it's like the first sport to kind of calm those inner storms in you. And I felt like, okay, this is not an introduction to sports. This is an introduction to wellness and environmental wellness, social wellness. You get to meet all these amazing people. Intellectual wellness is a college sport. They prepare you if you want to row in college. And so for me, when you think about rowing, of course, it's brutal, it's hard, it's tough, but there's something beautiful about you can see it as an escape and kind of escape everything. It's just 2 hours of pure meditation. And so I bring all those things together. It's like when you combine all those things in your life, it just makes you a better person inside and out. These guys on my team in the 90s on the West Side, I think, a lot of the guys were from different gangs in different neighborhoods. And so we first looked at each other, like, how's this going to work? Like, you're going to put us all in a boat and just have us row? And I think that there wasn't a lot of trust there. But what was interesting was that these guys who was like, you look at them and like, they're so hard. They feel like they have no fear. They're so tough. We go out there in the boat and we push out to open water, something that we wasn't comfortable with. In the same survival mode that told everyone, if you hear a gunshot, run, kind of told us, in order to get back to this dock safely, you have to pull for each other. And in order to pull for each other, you have to be quiet, you have to listen, you have to receive orders, you have to follow the person behind you, and you have to like kind of get to understand them and know them a little bit. And I think that these different characters, like number one, we all saw fear in each other for the first time out there in open water. And we was like, man, like we got something in common there. You know what I mean? And we learned every day by facing the same fears, experiencing the same pain together, understanding that we all have a lot of the same traumas, that we can't do the work of eight. But if we can get 8 people to do the work of one, we get things done faster. And so I think what we've learned is that, we all love something and connected to something when we have great leadership leading us into this magical place. And so I think that that's kind of what we learned from each other, that we are more alike than we are unalike. And it was cool to see that the change that everyone made in their lives. It was tough to write that because you say to yourself, we all have experienced maybe a girl breaking our heart or losing somebody or get punched in the face for the first time. There's some things that you don't want to relive again. and we kind of erase that. I had to relive that by writing that. And it was tough. I'm not sure if it was tougher than the last book because for me, it was like, I'm writing about this kid that's not really a kid anymore. And then this book, I had to write about like me, right? And so, again, it was like going back into that life and opening up those kind of worms that like my family didn't want to hear about again. And not having a dad around, never seeing the word dad a day in my life. Like, and there was times I like closed the laptop and I was like, I need some time off, right? And I think what made it more challenging is that not only I lived this life where it was a lot of structural limitations, a lot of neglect, a lot of violence, but some of that stuff still exists, right? And but what helped is like, okay, I remember saying, if we could just do this, if the YMCA just didn't close down, that we wouldn't lose the mentors and the coaches and all those things, right? So I think that writing that also helped me to explore more of the answers that I was searching for as a kid. To give that kid maybe, hey, as a young person, while you thinking this, these are some of the solutions that you can take as a young person that I was too afraid to take. You know what I mean? And so that's the kind of the that was the process. It was an emotional process writing about those things, but also it reminded me of the solutions and what I was capable of. And I think that was one of the greatest gifts that we gave the young people who was reading this book, who said, I read this and I done this at school. I started this peer group, right? I faced my fears. I said no to the gangs. And so this book was like a roadmap for what not to do. And so I was happy that I was able to split myself open and face some of those things that I haven't yet healed from for young people to heal. It takes me to one of my favorite stories. When when The Most Beautiful Thing came out, I got a call from this librarian. His name was Eric. He said, I mean, he had this like elegant but yet tense voice. And he said, Arshay, we just purchased 200 books and we're about to watch the film. And the kids read the book already and they're asking for you. They want to hear from you. And it's really touching their lives. And he said, can you come? Like, can you come? How soon can you come? And I was like, well, there's a schedule. He's like, no, I don't think you understand. They're asking for you. And that the way he said that hit me hard. And so, I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go. Where do I have to go? He said, Alliance, Ohio. I didn't even heard of Alliance, Ohio. And so he said, you have to fly into Pittsburgh and then drive an hour and a half into Alliance. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go. And I asked a buddy Matt to go with me. So I fly into Pittsburgh and we driving into Alliance, Ohio. There's 15 minutes left in the GPS. And I look up and there's Confederate flags everywhere. And I'm like, where the hell am I? Like, I'm thinking in my head, like when he called me that, these were kids who grew up like I did, who look like me. When they said they asking for you, they want to hear from you. And so we keep going. When I walked into the school, into the auditorium, I looked and I saw a sea of white faces and maybe a couple kids of color who were like biracial. And I walked down the aisle and these kids were screaming and shouting like I was LeBron James, waving their books in the air like a waving flag. And I went to the front and the first girl stood up, this white girl. The first thing she said, we have read the book. We all have seen the film. And I want to thank you because we all have unlearned everything that people taught us about people who look like and grew up like you. And that hit me in a way, and I think that answers your question, is that when I was young, I just knew I was experiencing these things, but I didn't know what was actually happening, right? I didn't know that there was like structural limitations. There was redlining. I didn't ask the questions and knew the story that my grandmother moved to Chicago because a friend was hung on a tree and she needed to move to a bigger city outside of the South. And my mom said she lost my grandmother to her trauma and never had access to heal from that trauma or access to talk to a therapist about the things that she saw in the South, right? There was so many layers that was taking place. And and then you hear my friend Pooh says, like, when they tore down the YMCA, I ran to the streets. Like, that's where the coaches were, the counselors were. There was 200 kids who showed up every day to play sports, to to get mentored, to do their homework, to have homework help. And then the place closed down because of funding. And now there's 200 kids in the street with nothing to do. And I don't care if you're black, white, Asian, if there's 200 kids hanging out with nothing to do every day, some crazy stuff is going to happen, right? I mean, you can see that from reading Lord of the Flies, right? Like, and so for me, I think that I've learned when I started rowing and as I got older that Chicago, there's so much beauty, right? There's so much talent, and that talent is everywhere, but access and opportunity is not. And I think that, and for me, that's when I said, I want to give back to the place that gave to me. And I want to go into these communities and give kids, not charity, but access and opportunity and watch them rise. And so that's kind of what I've learned in the process of writing this book that I couldn't quite see when I was young, when I was just living it, right? And I think that a lot of people go to the news or the paper to see what's going on in Chicago, but they're not talking about the grandmothers or the groups on the South Side that work closely with the police to do amazing things, right? And so I wanted to kind of paint that picture in my writing so people can understand a little bit more of Chicago. You'll learn to deal with your challenges and your obstacles with grace, with humor, with awareness. And you'll learn how to deal with performance anxiety, right? How to build and choose great relationships, but also for those who need help, for those who need support, for those who have battles every day, it also helps teachers and mentors and coaches and pastors and educators teach them how to contribute to the world without sacrificing their own self-care. You turn on the news and you're like, oh my God, it's over, right? And then people start giving and trying to help the world. But it teaches us how to contribute and how to give or include ourselves in the world that we're giving to and how to continue to support the world, but make sure that we're a better angel to ourselves so we can be a good angel to the world. And so that's what Let Me Be Real is all about. And it teaches people to tell their stories, to unshell for a little bit and open up your life to others so it can help others. I spent a lot of time speaking to corporations and young people and educators and things like that. And what I've learned is that there's a lot of people who feel like they're drowning in their work or in their relationships or in their friendships or in their marriages. Like they just feel like they're drowning, and there's a lot of stressors in life. And I know all about drowning because I didn't know how to swim before I started rowing. And the one thing about almost drowning, the again, the anxiety, the pressure, the force is overwhelming. But now we live in a time that we only know that people are drowning is when they drown. They don't know how to cry out. They don't know how to ask for help. It's very hard for people to ask for help. And so in all these elements of wellness, it teaches us how to reduce those stress that we have in our life when we feel like we're drowning. And for me, the most meaningful thing was like, number one, is just like, if I can go back and tell the younger version of myself anything, it would be, you don't have to fight alone. And I think the mental wellness, being able to talk to a therapist, right? Someone who sees what you may not see, to have a peer group, to share with your friends what's really going on in your life, right? That mental wellness was very important. The physical wellness was very important, like to take care of ourselves and to take care of our bodies and find knowledge on how to take care of our bodies so we can be good for others, so we can show up and be our best self. The environmental wellness, like I mentioned with rowing, like seeing gunshots and just like dirt and concrete and cigarette butts to just like experiencing like greenery and water. The environmental wellness is very important to how we see the world and how, like someone said to me before, it's like, you're up in Chicago and there's like a lot of craziness in the inner city. Then you go downtown and it's like lights and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is playing out of the speakers on Michigan Avenue. He's like, I don't want to punch anyone in the face to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Like, so that environment change really helps your mood, right? And so I think those were very important. And then the last thing was the vocational awareness. I believe that at one point, you and I may had a coach, a teacher, a mentor, a friend who gave us a little bit of hope. And I think that the hope we receive must transfer to the hope that we give. I realized that, hope was just not mine to keep, but also to give. And so like being able to be in a position of privilege to go to a conference or a great service, to receive hope and to learn so much, if we can just give it to others who need, or return to the place they gave to us, like the school we went to, and everyone could read to kids at the elementary school that they went to and tell their life experiences and make the world better. So we may be in a place where we feel like, oh, I am working out, I am seeing a therapist, but there's still other stuff that's wrong with me. I feel like those 8 elements of wellness makes you complete. You don't want just a piece of the pie, but the whole pie. Like when you have spiritual wellness and environmental wellness and physical wellness and social wellness, it makes you more of a complete person instead of just a slice of the pie.